We're up to our entire interview with Lisa Hart, famous for the Lisa Hart Band. But when you interview someone, you find out so many neat things about them. And I found a friend when I interviewed Lisa. She was such an interesting person, very spiritual cat. Talked honestly about touring with groups like April Wine and some of the songs like Old Time Movie, Dream Me Away, and a lot more. Our entire interview with Lisa Hart, who's back in the saddle in music, on Rock History Canada. There we go. Hi.
Hi, John. Nice to
I,
meet you.
Nice to meet you. Who did I see you in concert with? Was it in Miramichi, Newcastle, New Brunswick? Was it April Wine?
Yes, it was
Ah, I remember
Lisa
that.
Hart Band. Yes. Well, we had a ball. That was a great tour. I remember because we had the equipment of Pink Floyd.
What?
We had their equipment. They didn't want to bring it back to Europe. They were coming back. They didn't want to store it. So we had April Wine had the equipment and all of their techies. So we had brilliant sound. I know. It was
Oh,
just, we really lucked out.
I had the album, loved the album. And you know what's strange? People would come up to me and say things like, they'd say, "Oh, is this like one of the Hart sisters?" I said, "No, that's the Wilson sisters. That's Ann and Nancy." But because of was there ever because a lot of music fans are fair weather music fans. They don't really they mean well. They all mean nothing against them. But sometimes, did you ever get that at all?
Well, I got a funny story about the Hart,
Yeah,
Hart
yeah,
sisters,
sure.
Wilson sisters. So we were booked to play a big festival, we thought, like an open air festival. I can't remember. I mean, so many years ago. We were all excited because it was one of our first festivals with all the people outside and everything. We got there and it was Hell's Angels. And they had booked Hart and they got Lisa Hart. And it was like, I mean, we were not so different musically at the core, if you think about Steamboat Annie. But later they went into
Dreamboat
like
Annie. Yeah, Dreamboat Annie.
Steamboat
Yep.
Annie, sorry.
Yep.
And then later they went into, you have to forgive me. I mean, I lots of stuff changes in my mind. Um, they went a little harder rock than we did, right? We were more fusion. We were a Montreal band basically that were fused with European sound as well as American sound and folk roots, really folk rock roots, which are my roots. So yeah, we had that was a very difficult gigs. We almost didn't make it out of there alive. We had to pull out every cover that we ever did
Yeah.
of any rock song. And
Yeah.
I mean, we did it. I mean, I'd been singing a long time at that point, right?
Yeah. You got into, I became a Reiki master as well. After my divorce in 86, how they say a snake, and I was a snake, sheds its skin all the way. We can go back and forth in music, but I just realized the cathartic moment and the opportunity in a breakup. And so I was picking up The Road Less Traveled and the Seth books, and I'm reading everything.
Yeah.
And you know how it is, like attracts like, you start attracting those type of people. What got you there? And was there any semblance of that when you were a little girl?
Oh, definitely. My mother was very much into what they call spirituality. And she had me reading The Third Eye when I was like 10 and 12, like trying to get into the third eye. But she was a really basically um, a discouraged hippie. In other words, she was born in the 20s, but she was really a hippie. I was never a hippie. It's so ironic. And yet I grew up in the 60s, right? I was a young girl in the 60s. But yes, she really turned me on to everything. She was so smart, so styling, loved music. She marched in the marches on Selma, Alabama for civil rights. She was in Harlem for all the riots. She knew all the jazz players. She was an artist, and that's where I mean, I really found that life so intriguing, and it opened me up. Now, we put it all aside for a while and got into our own little trip of being on the road and everything rock and roll. But lately, like also in the 80s, I had an epiphany. My health was terrible. I was not able to stop drinking. So I had to come to terms with that, live or die. I was given 3 months to live, basically. And so I took the road less traveled and got sober. And I'm going into my 40th year. This is my 40th year. So that's why the music is so important to me now, because I'm writing about, I'm in service. I think being in service, I was always in service, because when you listen to Star Watcher, every one of those songs is really about being being bigger than who we are, being more than who we are. Really, I was very deep then, and I'm deeper now, but I'm more human now. I'm not so concerned about the cosmos. It's more about today and the people I love, and the people that are suffering. And mental illness is a huge part of like what I do in terms of service and reaching out. I'm what they call an old timer, and an old long timer, whatever you call.
Yeah.
And so I'm called upon to do a lot of speaking and counseling and stuff. And the Reiki and the sound practitioner work, I absolutely fell in love with the two modalities, because they really foster wellness. I will never talk about the word healing. I think we all self-heal. We do things to help ourselves. But the music part of it, using world instruments, learning how to play drums properly, like real authentic indigenous drums, it's very hard now because of the woke community, if I can be so bold, because now it's called you're taking somebody else's instruments and using them. But for my own private practice and work, I use a buffalo drum, I use an ocean drum, I use I use bells, I use my voice mostly, and I use syllables. I don't speak in words, and it's magic. It's absolutely magic. And when you're combining that with Reiki, you cannot go wrong. You feel better. I have people sometimes get off the mat and say, wow, I feel just refreshed. I just feel refreshed, because you just drop down. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. It's not like you go away anywhere. It's not woo woo like that. You just allow yourself to drop a little bit below the chaos of the world that surrounds you. And there's so much refreshment in that. So that's
Lisa
where I'm
Hart has
at today.
flown. The Lisa Hart I know has flown. It's so wonderful. I mean, look at my face. Look at my face.
Yeah. I'm loving this life. I did the right thing all those years ago. It took me a long journey to get back to my music, I'll be honest with you, because I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know how to shed. Part of that skin was in the bars, and just with the people, and I didn't know how I was going to do it outside of that. I really didn't. It took me a long time to get really confident, a long time. But I
I
did
hear
all
you.
my I did all my studying. So I went back to school, I got a degree, and then I'm going for a master's, and I want to go for a PhD, and it's just learning, growing, learning, and flourishing.
So your surname was Hart?
No, my real name is Eisenhart. So Eisenhardt. And in those days, before Linda Ronstadt, you couldn't use, and it was so close to the Second World War that German names. My lineage is Danish, so but it was I'm from a little place called Schleswig-Holstein, which was in the Bismarck days. He appropriated Schleswig and Holstein, but that's where I'm from. And everybody that was Danish booted back to Copenhagen, right? Out of those German
Mhm.
places, taking their names with them. But I have a castle somewhere, Eisenhardt Castle. I hope to
Let's
move in.
go.
Yeah.
When I saw you, I'll be honest. When I saw you on stage, it was right in front. I was crushing on you. So there's something for you. I remember going. I just love this woman. I love the way she sings. I love the way she moves. I'll never forget it. But anyway, there you go.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. I can remember that tour so well because Miles was so pissed off at me because I wouldn't wear jeans. a stupid little thing like that you remember, right? But whatever his problem was, like he didn't think we should be with them, and I thought we did a great job. I really did. I thought because we had this amazing relationship with the sound people and they were the best in the world. You think about it, right? Pink Floyd, for God's sake, please God. No, that was just a little aside. That was just, it made me laugh when I thought about that tour. I thought, oh, Miles, I never really felt I looked good in jeans. Even though I was rock and roll, I was not rock and roll. Like I crossed these generations. It was like I was everywhere. I was a writer. I wanted to be a great writer. I wanted to look great. I loved television. Nobody thought that was cool, but I did. I loved television. And I thought I could do great in television. And actually I was asked to replace Anne Murray one summer with her original show. She was off for a summer and I wasn't able to do it, but that would have been the making of me, I think, right then when I was that young, that much younger, because I loved it and I love people and I know I come across great like that.
Mhm.
It's just about reaching through the camera. It really is. It's all about the joy, the joy of it all.
Right. By the way, is there
Well,
anybody in April 1 that you connected with? Jim? Oh, Jim. Was Jim Clench still in the band? Was it Steve Lang? I forget. The bass player.
Jim
What tour was
was,
it, by the way? I forget what tour it was. The Whole World's Going Crazy? Wasn't it
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, no, Steve Lang was in the band. He was the bass player. Jerry Mercer. Uh,
Jerry is one of my dearest friends.
no way.
I haven't talked to him for a long time because he sort of went AWOL and disappeared, but he's somewhere near Kingston. But Ray Blake, of course, was in Lisa Hart band. So Rayburn was part of Mash Can.
Yeah.
And so that whole thing, right, of Jerry and Ray. Yeah, he was one of my dearest friends. I loved him dearly. And I love Brian Greenway. I
He's a
do
nice
love,
guy. He's a
yeah,
decent man.
he really is. He's really sweet. I just saw him a couple of years ago here in Toronto. He played a bowling alley of all things, just a solo act, and he was amazing. And I
Mhm.
just thought to myself, wow, people are yakking, and it's just a different world now.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
What about Gary Moffat?
Gary, I loved him too, very much. Yeah, Gary, and I haven't the Moffats. Everybody's kind of disappeared off my radar. Um,
But that's normal. All the people I talk to, they kind of say the same thing. They're going, I'm busy with my thing. We all get to a certain age where, I'm looking at the end of the clock. I'm watching the clock myself because I'm doing the best work I think I've ever done, and because I was always lazy in radio. But I'm going, I can contribute. Wait a minute, I'm more comfortable in my body. Wait a minute, I can do this. I like to work.
this is the whole thing. This is exactly where I'm at. I have never felt so happy to be in my own skin ever. It doesn't matter what's going on. I can put what's going on in the world, what's going on around me. I I have to put that all on hold while I'm thinking about talking with you. Like be in the moment, be present, right? So, I mean, I have something going on in my life now that is absolutely devastating to me, but I can't and won't allow that to take away from our time. And that's never happened to me before. That's a lot of work. I've worked very, very hard at staying present and not allowing emotions to ride roughshod over me or anything, right? So it's a truly wonderful time to be alive. And I think I read something where when you get in your 70s, which is where I'm at,
You look
73.
great. You look great. I'll say it again.
Well, I have had no work done, so I'm doing all right. Um, it's mostly because I don't eat anything bad, too. Oh, that's the other thing. I just don't eat anything bad. I just took care of that because I don't want that inflammation and all that stuff, right?
Oh, by the way, I got to. Okay, how does someone who might have 3 months to live, what happens to your liver if that? Because I went through a period of drinking like a crazy bastard.
The
Uh,
liver actually regenerates itself if you don't go too far into cirrhosis, which, um, my problem was not the cirrhosis, it was a heart related thing due to the alcoholism. I hadn't crossed that line with the liver to be in cirrhotic liver like that. So I was really lucky, and I was very young, youngish, 35.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I got off the wheel before it all crashed on me. And the other thing I never did, and this is interesting, I was never drunk on stage. It was always like a reward for a couple of weeks, or or a setback, or it was in between, but it was still as destructive. And then there's a point where you never stop. And I think when I was asked to go to LA in the 70s after the Lisa Hart band broke up, which was heartbreaking to me that we
Yeah,
broke
let's
up.
talk
We
about that
couldn't
in a
find
second.
a good I was going to be the female Rod Stewart. That's what they wanted from me. The management company. The management company was managing Natalie Cole and a whole bunch of other artists, but Natalie Cole was actually funding The Office. She was really big at that time, right? This will be that whole album, right? And the specials and everything. So Kevin Hunter was my manager from Montreal. He managed the Bells as well. And he had moved to LA and managed Natalie. She was riding high, and then he convinced me to go to LA because he had managed me when I was a kid with Ken Tobias in a group called Crystal Staircase. So he knew me all those years. So I thought, I trust him. It'll be fun. Oh my God. It was the worst thing I ever did
Why?
because I was drinking and I didn't know I had the problem. I thought I was okay, I was just drinking the way other rock stars drink.
When in Rome.
Dumb. I like no thought there at all, right? But I had been with a group of people who I loved and who trusted me, and we'd been together for 12 years. Suddenly I'm on my own. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm in Shark Valley, Los Angeles, like we're oh my God. I was like a little kid. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was in trouble all over the place. In trouble with myself, in trouble with like I had a great time while I was there. I spent a lot of somebody's money. I don't know, and then I had to go and earn it back and pay them back. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
Natalie. Okay, here's the deal. Natalie's going to produce me. So we drive to Muscle Shoals, and I'm gonna meet with Barry Beckett. It's a big deal, big deal. We get there, she's out of her mind, and I'm half cut, and Barry's half cut, and Kevin's half cut, and like nothing happens. And then the following week, we drive back, and I fly home to Toronto, do something, try to make some money, pay some money back to somebody, and then fly. It was all nuts. It was all just nuts. I get to Nashville, and I'm in an elevator, and I notice that Ray Charles is standing beside me, and I'm going to meet Natalie. And I say to him, Mr. Charles, I'm so excited to meet you. He says, oh, that's nice, girl. Nice to meet you too. Who are you going to see? I said, I'm going to see Natalie Cole. I'm really excited. We haven't seen each other for a little bit. He says, I wouldn't go near that room. I went, oh, what's happening? Well, unbeknownst to me, she had stolen the gate of the concert in Nashville the night before and blamed it on her roadie, and there was police everywhere, and they completely forgot I was coming in. And it just showed me right there that I was totally out of my depth, that this was not for me,
That's
and
crazy town.
I said to Kevin after that whole thing went down, I said, I need work. I need work in Canada. You've taken me away from my fan base. You've put me with all these people who are not doing anything for me. I was supposed to write with him, David Foster, and somebody from Doctor Music, Brian Russell, and Brenda Russell, and all these people. And we did all meet, but nothing. You know what I mean? I was small. I was small fish. I had nothing to offer them at that point. So that was Kevin calling in favors, and it was not. It was going nowhere. and I was really unhappy, and I have a lot to offer. And I said, no, I'm worth a lot more than this. I don't want to go. I'd rather go home. I love Canada. What the hell? Why do I need this?
So
You know?
how did the band get signed well,
Lisa
okay,
Hart. Oh, Lisa Hart Band.
yeah.
Okay, well, that was also a Montreal connection. A guy named Bob Hahn, who was the biggest jingle writer in Canada, who used me when I was a kid. He had a company called Champlain Records, and we got signed with Champlain. I Before that I was signed with Polydor, RCA Victor, a bunch of labels for singles. I did a lot of singles on my own before Lisa Hart Band, and then he created a label, and we signed with Champlain Records, Rising Records, it was called in the end. It was Champlain was the big the, the over company, whatever you call that. I don't know.
The parent company.
Again, I was from the old school, like the actors, where you're part of a stable. I didn't even have a bank account, John. I didn't know how to manage my own money. I had never had to drive myself, ever. I had never had to do anything. Like everything was taken care of. But you, like Judy Garland, you don't know like, where are your tools to live? Should something happen? Like, prepare for impact? No, nobody prepared me. So when it hit, I was like, and then the alcoholism right on top of that, like that, well, that was part of it. I was just so scared. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't want to let my parents know that this. I just kept telling them everything was great, and from the outside everything looked great. I was doing these big super shows with Anne Murray and this, and I was over in Sweden with ABBA and Bruce Coburn, and it all looked amazing, right? And meantime I'm like, oh my god, I had no idea what to do next. Like,
Was it just too much? I mean, I always say if I was Justin Bieber, I'd be dead. I would have died to have that kind of fame, but that's a lot coming at you.
it was too much because I was with people that I couldn't count on. Like, I didn't feel, after the band broke up, I just felt totally alone. Those guys were my family,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Why'd the
Still
band
to
break
this
up?
day. We just couldn't make it. We just couldn't get work. Everybody needed to work. They all wanted to have their families, and we couldn't. It was coming into that disco time, and where nobody was hiring people like us. Like, our whole window of opportunity was 10 years, and if we hadn't gone to the moon and back in those 10 years and created that one hit that could carry us. Remember the days when one hit could carry you for a long time? And we didn't. We got there, sort of. But my body, I still stand by the body of work. I still think it's beautiful today, and it stands up to anything.
We'll talk about the new
So,
single in a second, but old time movie. Tell me about
oh yeah.
that.
Well, Rayburn Blake wrote that, but he wrote it for me because I always loved old movies, and I always loved the way people live. My father was born in 1906. He was an old father. He had me in his 40s, and I was the first kid. And he died at age 100. So I'm hoping I'm on the same track. But he and we loved that time. We loved all that wonderful eccentricity, and that crazy wild music and dance and jazz, and yeah, it was. So he wrote it for me, and then he said, it's not like an old time movie, dear, it's real life, right? So yeah, so that's what that was about. But it struck a chord with a lot of people, that song, it really did. And then that was produced by Ralph Murphy. I don't know if you know his work,
I
right?
remember Ralph
Okay.
Murphy. Yeah.
And then the other three, I did three with Phil Ramone, two big ones. So Star Watcher and All Over the World. And All Over the World was supposed to be a really big anthem, like anthemic. I like to write anthems.
Well, Dream Me
Um, I,
Away. I look at that. I'm
oh
going,
man, that's
oh my
amazing.
God. That song has stood with me for years.
It is a beautiful song.
Is it your channel that you have your on a TV
Yeah.
show, right? Yeah, that was your own channel. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yes.
nice.
Yeah, that was a nice introduction, eh? Because he can be a curmudgeon guy, or he was. He could be like really with the rock people, but he was great that night. I mean, he just said he fell in love with the band, and that was live off the floor. There was no auto tune there, honey.
Would you tell? What would you tell? Oh, let's look at that girl in that video, that young lady.
Yeah, okay.
What would you tell her anything? Would you change it? Would you whisper anything in her ear?
Not at that time. We were so solid. That was a beautiful time. And every time we sang and played together, I mean, we had Denny. Denny Gerard was so solid on bass, and Marty Cordry on drums, and Richard Ewan on keys, and Rayburn on guitar, and me on whatever I was doing, singing and playing. But you know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God, we had worked so hard. We felt so comfortable together. And we were just like, we just needed that lift off. And it was just unfortunate that the trajectory of time just coincided with Giorgio Moroder and Donna Summer.
Donna Summer, yeah.
They came crashing into my life, right?
Tell me about the
Yeah.
new single. That title says a
Hmm.
lot.
Don't tell me how I feel. Okay, so the real story is that this was dedicated to my brother Chris. He died in 2015, directly related to mental illness. He suffered all his life, and all he ever wanted, he was the most beautiful looking man. If you see the picture at the end of the video is him. He looks like Robert Redford, right? He was in movies a lot. He was always a stand-in for either Richard Chamberlain or Robert Redford. He was a beautiful man, but could not live on this earth, this planet, in this time. He was just all over the place. Brain chemistry, you call it. We tried everything. Now, I say we, I mean the whole family. Um, I had to write his story, but I had to use myself as a protagonist. But if you think about it, it is my story too. And it what it means is most people try and fix people with mental illness and fix them with drugs, fix them with therapy, fix them. Everything's fixed. But when do you listen? When do you really listen to that person? It's very hard because it's garbled. It's coming out not straight from the heart, right? And you can get really annoyed. We used to spend days and days talking to this guy, talking him off the ledge, and then he'd go right out and do it again. He'd go off his meds and do the whole thing again. So it's the same thing with someone with an addiction problem. You can talk and talk and talk and talk. They have to come to that realization. Chris was never able to grasp the realization that he had to do the work himself, but I still wanted to honor his story because he was so beautiful. So there's such a dark heart. There's a dark and a light to all of us, right?
Yeah.
He was such a he was my best friend until he was like we were close, really close. So I had to write that song. I had to write that song. And once I started, I thought, I'm going to write a little EP that talks about my journey of recovery. And you'll hear the rest in January when I release it. And it's really important. And I want to do a TEDx talk where I go out to people and I talk about the journey, about truth, what telling the truth really is. So,
I
you know, I worked with Chris Burkett. Do you know anything about Chris Burkett?
no.
You have to look him up. Okay, so I was so fortunate, John. I know you're probably running out of time, but I was so
Yeah, I've got
fortunate.
another one on top of the hour.
Okay.
But we'll talk again. I'll
Okay.
email you and we'll get this thing going because you and I could talk for yeah.
Yes. So anyway, Chris Burkett and I worked digitally, virtually during the pandemic. I only met with him one time to do vocals for a different track. So, but I did all my own recording of my vocals, and then he, of course, took it and made it better and produced it. He did all the tracks except for acoustic guitar. So we had a beautiful relationship, and how I found him was he was actually living in Toronto, but I had always loved his work, and he was the actual engineer on Sinead O'Connor's big hit. he was the man.
Wow.
Yes, because they fired the original guy, but they never gave him credit because he wasn't credited as a producer or an engineer because the other guy had signed the contract first. But he actually finished it because she fired the other guy. I don't remember his name. Anyway, he's got an amazing pedigree. He won the Polaris Prize for Buffy St. Marie. He did Running with the Drum. He did. He brought her back from obscurity. I mean, seriously,
Hmm.
totally beautiful work that she's done in the last few years, and that's what really did it for me because Buffy is my. I'm a fan. I'm a deep fan on many levels. So when I saw that he might be available, I just meekly wrote him and said, "Are you available to produce virtually? And how much are you? And can I afford you?" And we had a Zoom like you and we fell in love with the process, right? I mean, it was just like, wow, you want to do that? I'm in. I'm in. This is what I can do for you, and we just went from there.
Wow. Good for
Yeah.
you. I mean, I always love when connect I love connections. I love when people, you're a kid, you're listening to the radio, 20 years later, you're in the same room with that person, or all those
Oh,
things that happen. I love that.